We come to chapter 17, called Heaven on Earth. And the Pali for this is Pavatite cha bhagavatha Dhamma chake pumha deva sadhamanu save sung. Ajahn Sucitto's got a misprint in there as well, so he ran out of space on the save sung. Etam bhagavatha bara nasiyang isipatane migataye anuttarang dhammachakang pavatitang appativatiyang samanena va brahmanena va devena va marena va brahmuna va kena chiva lokasmin te. Which means, when the wheel of Dhamma had been set rolling by the Blessed One, the devas of the earth raised the cry. At Varanasi, in the deer park at Isipatana, the matchless wheel of Dhamma has been set rolling by the Blessed One, not to be stopped by any samana or Brahmin or Deva or Mara or Brahma or anyone in the world. And the picture we have is a kind of Hawaiian Buddha surrounded by tropical greenery and little pixies cavorting. There's one riding a hummingbird here. And there's dancing around in the leaves. So the Bhuma Deva, the earth spirits or the earth devas, these are the devas of flowers and trees and the rocks and rivers and such like. So it's a very much the sort of grounded and the most sort of say accessible and local forms of devas. So they're not very exalted little pixies. The one riding on the back of a fish down here, and so that they are the sort of earth spirits and the little kind of informing entities of, let's say, house spirits or spirits of caves and glades in the forest and such like. So they're the coarsest kind of devas in the Buddhist cosmology. And around the edge we have, again, Ajahn Sucitto's return to the Celtic knotwork form. So this is all very green, along with the sort of greenery of the forest and the garden. The knotwork has woven itself around, creating the form. And then there's a smiling sun figure down at the bottom there. This section of the sutta describes the effect of the teaching on various celestial realms. In painting these pictures of the various Devaloka, I've taken considerable artistic license. The text is very non-committal. It simply states that these various devas hear this, and then having done so, they proclaim it to the beings in the next realm. However, many people nowadays would dismiss the realm of Devata as a quaint feature of Buddhist cosmology, a hangover from Vedic tradition or the folklore of the time. The section of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta which describes the rejoicing of the Devata that the Dhamma has been taught would then seem to serve no useful purpose, and even detract from the practical importance of the teaching by introducing elements of whimsical mythology. And of course we don't want whimsy, do we? So we're not, serious meditators would not go for anything so sort of superficial and flighty. So, but he continues, are they there as signs of a textual aberration, or as embellishments on the main body of the sutta for conventional purposes? Do they add any meaning to the sutta? So it's also notable that some people who are not particularly fond of Buddhist mythology or superstition, say Ajahn Buddhadasa, for example, when they recite the Dhammacakka Sutta at Suanmok, as I understand it, at his monastery and his students, they politely edit the rejoicing of the devas out, and so they just sort of stay with the straight Dhamma teaching and the realization of Anya Kandanya, and then the effect that awakening has upon him, so that they just quietly edit that little piece out. But I feel it's very wise and also helpful that Ajahn Sucitto addresses that, and the way that we chant it, we also are editing out as we go along. So the way we do it, we do the full text for the Bhuma Devas, the earth Devas, and then each one after that is abbreviated somewhat. We don't do all the repetitions, and the last section or the last verse that we do of this here, the style that we have here in the Wat Pah Pong Ajahn Chah's monastery, you just say the Brahmaloka and you lump that all together as under one heading. But in the original sutta, if you look at the text, which as you have it in the Sutta Pitaka, it goes through I think about 18 different Brahma realms, sort of named one by one by one by one by one. So if you chant them all, it takes a long time, and it goes through the different sections. So the Brahma realms is probably 3 or 4 times as large as all the other Deva realms, but they name each one. And and even though Ajahn Sucitto says it simply states that these various devas hear this, and then having done so, they proclaim it to the beings in the next realm. The way I understand it, or the way that it sort of appears in the Pali, is that say, for example, when the Bhuma Devas are celebrating, so the ones who are closest, the local spirits there in the deer park in Isipatana, that they witness this amazing event of the Buddha giving his first discourse, and then the Dhamma being transmitted for the first time, and so they celebrate. But then it's like the devas in the realm of the 4 great kings thinking, what's going on down there? Those Bhuma devas are making a big racket down in Isipatana. What's happening? And then they overhear it. They overhear the celebrations going on down in the sort of the floor below. And then they realize, oh my goodness, there's a Buddha who's appeared in the world and he's teaching, fantastic. So then the devas of the Chatu Maharaja Loka, the heaven of the 4 kings, they start celebrating, and then the Tavatimsa devas go, what's that noise going on there? What's that racket? Those the heaven of the 4 kings, they're really having a party down there. And then they again overhear it. So it's more like, because of the strength of the rejoicing, it sort of cascades up through, right up into the lofty Brahma realms, where they have these formless beings who don't even have bodies, they're just pure mind. And they think, what's that going on? Does one hear something? And then so that it's rather that they're not sort of talking to them, but more it's just like the image is that of the power of the event and the uniqueness of it, so catches the attention of the devas of more and more refinement, until it reaches right up into the heavenly world of the highest strata. So then Ajahn Sucitto continues. We can appreciate the significance of the heavenly realms by reflecting on the structures and themes of Buddhist cosmology. For a start, Buddhist cosmology puts the thinking mind in its place by making it clear that the universe of innumerable worlds is too vast for the human mind to reckon with. Our ability to conceive in rational terms is impressive, but finally inadequate for such a purpose. With the cultivation of the path, we have to bring forth a different kind of knowing, one that is not abstract, but related to the mind that can recognize dukkha. That kind of knowing is the insightful knowing that recognizes the changing and insubstantial nature of the sensory experience of reality. It is in touch with the quality of volition and karma. As you come to understand dukkha, you recognize the voice of ignorance that persuasively denies any state of being other than that which is based upon a cursory attention to sensory experience. Through meditation, you can know the clinging that supports rational sense perceptions and denies irrational or mythical perceptions. The mind endowed with insight abides in the knowing that it's free from such views. To the awakened, things neither exist nor do they not exist. They have a relative existence. They arise and cease, dependent on conditions. So there's a number of different themes in there. One of which is, I think there was a question or a comment from Nevin the other day, and I said, well, one of the things that is the 4 imponderables is the range of the mind of a Buddha, and so this term achinteya means unthinkable or imponderable, which means the thinking mind hasn't got enough dimensions, or it can't represent the reality. It's like if I say, like in subatomic physics, they talk about having not just 3 dimensions in time, but they talk about having 11 dimensions or 23 dimensions, and and that those extra dimensions are all curled up in tiny little spirals. 23 dimensions curled up in little spirals. Yeah. How would you describe that? I mean, maybe you can do it with a mathematical equation, or maybe your mind creates a little image of a kind of tangled ball of thread, but 23 dimensions, 20 of which are tangled up in little spirals, boggles the mind. And there are even very persuasive theories that say it's more likely that there's actually 196,884 dimensions, which accurately describe the nature of all subatomic particles and phenomena. Okay, if 23 dimensions was bad enough, how about 196,884? I kid you not. So it boggles the mind, and so the one of the unique features of Buddha Dhamma is that the Buddha is very clear about the limits of conceptual knowledge. So he never tries to represent ultimate reality in words, other than in the most simple ways, like saying Dhamma is timeless, apparent here and now, to be realized individually by the wise. So there's no, he doesn't try to give a sort of metaphysical description of what ultimate reality is like. And 99% of the teaching is around, do this and you'll realize for yourself, but you can't put it into words. And there's also a very useful description the Buddha has about the conceiving mind. It's called manyati, is to conceive, and so a conception, or the mind creating a thought. So manyati, he says, conceiving is a disease. Conceiving is like a cancerous tumor. Conceiving is like an affliction. It's a burden. It's stressful. So basically saying, as soon as you try and squish the reality into a word or a concept, you're missing the reality. And so that over and over again throughout his teachings, he's pointing to the fact that words can only give you it's like a word on the cover, Dhamma. Yeah, that is not the Dhamma. That's red ink on a piece of cardboard that's indicating a quality. But that in itself is just a pattern of red ink. And so what we always do, well, regularly do as human beings, is we mistake the idea for the reality. We mistake the word. And as T.S. Eliot put it, between the idea and the fact, there falls the shadow. That there's the idea of something, or the name for something, but the difference between that and the actuality is immeasurably vast. That shadow is the shadow of our ignorance. And Ajahn Sucitto puts it very, very skillfully here. It's a theme I've been bringing up the last little while. As you come to understand dukkha, you recognize that the voice of ignorance that persuasively denies any state of being other than that which is based upon a cursory attention to sensory experience. Like, I can see this as a table, therefore it's a table. And then we take that way of judging it or naming it as an ultimate reality. Whereas if you speak French, then you wouldn't say table, you'd pronounce it differently. You'd say table or something like that. The different languages, the different way that we conceive things, they vary, and so that recognition that any way we name things or conceive things has to be limited is what he's pointing to here. But in the use of the word knowing, again, it's one of those things one of those words that we have associations of that word in English, but when we say knowing, referring to vidya, or that awareness, or panya, wisdom, that knowing, when we use the word knowing in the Buddhist context, it doesn't mean knowing about. It doesn't mean like having the information relating to, but more it's the actual quality of awareness itself. So it's not knowing about, but it's the quality of knowing itself. And as he says, the mind endowed with insight abides in the knowing that is free from such views. To the awakened, things neither exist nor do they not exist. They have a relative existence. They arise and cease dependent on conditions. So that little sentence at the end there, that's relates to one of the Buddha's most significant teachings about whether things exist or whether they don't exist. And it's in the, I think it's Sutta number 15 in the section in the connected discourses, the section on causation, and this the Buddha is talking to Kachana, one of his enlightened disciples, and he says how the way that people tend to think, that in the worldly way of looking and thinking, that some people will say that things exist. This is a real table. That really exists. This is a real thing. And the other extreme, people will say, no, there is really no table there. Things don't exist. And and then he says that by clinging to the two extremes of existence and non-existence, then that's how the mind creates dukkha, creates discord. But it's by not clinging to either extreme, the awakened mind realizes that things, or what we call something like a table, is dependently arisen. It comes into it has a relative existence. So you can say this table is relatively real. You can't say it's absolutely a table, and you can't say there's nothing there. But instead say that this tabling thing here has arisen according to certain conditions, and by our conventions we call it a table, or whatever language. I mean, this is a very international place, so we could come up with Hungarian, Portuguese, Polish, Spanish, French, Italian, Thai, Sri Lankan, many, many different languages here, and we'd all have a different word, and our minds would create the image in slightly different ways. But that the issue that he's pointing to here is that when we recognize, well, this is my mind's way of representing this, or my mind's way of talking about it, that my, as he says, cursory attention to sensory experience, we don't mistake that for being an ultimate truth. We say, well, that's, what my little 3 dimensions and the sense of time can do with the actuality of 196,884 dimensions of what's really here. It's the reality is unrepresentable, and so that when we are able to see that our perceptions, our thoughts, can only be relatively true, then we look at our life with a much greater spaciousness and flexibility, because we know that this is what I'm seeing and hearing and thinking is that it's like a working hypothesis. It's a good enough reality to go on. So that when I say table and touch this thing and make a noise, then most of the people here, most of us say, "Oh, I know what he's talking about. I get the picture." But you're not deluding yourself that the entirety of what's actually here is contained in the word table, or indicated by the sound of a knuckle knocking it. So this is also one of the reasons why I recommend. I feel that the Oliver Sacks' book, "The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat," I feel that should be required reading for all Buddhist meditators. I'm not kidding. It's because if you read that, it gives you a very, very different perspective on perception and how the mind creates its images of the world, because describing these different illnesses or injuries that people have had, and how their minds try and create their picture of the world, and what the world is like when things go wrong. So it helps you to see that, that's how my memory works, or that's how my imagination works, or that's how an eye that's not colorblind works, or this is how a mind that actually can remember something beyond 5 seconds ago. That's how I think. We remember. Some people don't. One of the pathologies in that book, if I remember correctly, describes this fella. I don't know how he would operate, but he's a professional musician and a conductor, orchestral conductor, but has no memory. He can't remember anything from more than about 3 or 4 seconds before. So his wife has to keep reintroducing herself to him all the time. But still, he can function as an orchestral conductor. Go figure. So that he's standing in the kitchen. This person walks in. "Good morning, George. I'm your wife." Oh. Really? But that's how things are shaped. I knew this fellow in the States who was had a very, very serious car crash in Death Valley, incidentally. He went through the windscreen of his car and was smashed up on the road, and they thought he was going to die. He was in a coma for about 3 months. And when he came out of it, he'd worked as a cultural anthropologist, and he was American, but he lived in South America. So when he came out of his coma, he didn't even realize he was a person. He didn't know what people were. He was awake, he was conscious, but he didn't realize what he was or what people were. His mind was not able to form that. And so he woke up in his hospital room, and there was one of the hospital workers was pushing this floor polisher, waxing the floor in his room. And he thought that the thing that was making all the noise must be the significant entity. So he started speaking to the polishing machine, because he thought, well, this must be one of the locals. And he didn't realize that the thing that was pushing the machine was another human being like him, because his mind at that time wasn't able to put together, oh, I'm one of those things with the two sticks at the bottom that move around. And so he started speaking in Spanish to the floor polisher, the actual machine, and slowly it pieced itself back together. But he was a very, very interesting fellow, and he said, when I was he was a university professor. When I was a professor, I was always getting impatient with my students, and whenever I was in a conversation, I was always trying to get away because I had important things to go on with. He said, now my whole sense of time is really messed up because I can't imagine the future, so I'm never bored. And any conversation that I'm in, I'm completely interested in the people that I'm talking to because my mind doesn't create a future. Interesting. So when you take the trouble to consider that our version of the perceptual world is a formed and conceived and created thing, then it makes you much more broad-minded about how other people see things. And it makes you also more ready to be mistaken. Oh, I didn't see that. I didn't realize that was happening. Oh, that's a different way of looking at it. Aha. Rather than, I'm right, you're wrong. Anyway, to continue. The rational mind has not found satisfactory answers to the questions of the origin, the extent, the structure, or the workings of the universe in purely material terms. A Buddhist, understanding the codependency of motivation and perception, might very well ask, why do you want to know? Okay, why do you want to know about the origin, extent, and structure of the universe? Why do you want to know? Why you want to know and your view of what you and the real world actually are will affect how you attempt to find out the answer to this question. If your idea of reality is of being a separate entity in an objectively existing universe, you probably want to know it in order to eventually control and exploit it, the right that self-view grants to humans. So you try to understand the universe by looking at what is far away, not at your mind. After all, that's not supposed to be part of the universe. Right? When we think of the universe, the mind creates stars, planets, galaxies, rather than, my mind. Right? If you want to see the universe through a telescope, fine, but that will only show you a telescope's opinion of the universe, precisely, conditioned by the ways of telescopes and interpreted by the brain. Do you believe in curved space? Or black holes where time slows down and stops? Or distances so vast that it would take millions of years travelling at the speed of light to cover a tiny portion of the cosmos? Or that the stars are flecks of fire set in the vaults of heaven? Or that God created human beings out of mud, having created the rest of the universe in 5 days? Personally, I like all those ideas, for what effects and reflections they can set off in my mind. But Buddhist cosmology is very closely tailored to fit the path to the real experience of Nibbana. In this system, the world that we dwell in is the realm of conscious experience, in which the ingrained volitional tendencies and perceptions of consciousness play an essential part. And he quotes something by Muirhead from the Encyclopaedia Britannica here. Apart from the activity of the self as subject in sensory reaction, memory and association, imagination, judgment and inference, there can be no world of objects. A thing in itself, which is not a thing to some consciousness, is an entirely unreliable because contradictory conception. Should I read that again? So it's more sort of philosopher speak, but it's saying that the same things that I've been putting into Buddhist speak. Apart from the activity of the self as subject, the feeling of knowing, in sensory reaction, memory and association, imagination, judgment and inference, there can be no world of objects. They're saying the world that we experience is the world of seeing, hearing, thinking, remembering, imagining. That's the world. It doesn't say that there isn't a substrate that those perceptions are sort of deriving their impressions from, but the only world that we can know is the world that we're conscious of through our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and thinking mind, our imagination, judgment, and memory, and so on. A thing in itself, which is not a thing to some consciousness, is an entirely unreliable because contradictory conception. So that if there's no people around, there's no beings, what is this? And so it's saying that that in a way exactly the same as the Buddhist approach. So a thing in itself, it's saying, well, our mind creates the thingness of it. We conceive it as a particular quality, a particular thing, and just recognizing, yeah, that's a conceiving. You're not saying that there's nothing there, but just saying this is my mind's version of this what I call this thing. No intended actions are without effect in the world of the agent. With this understanding, Buddhist cosmology works, in line with every other form of the teaching, as a guide for conscious experience, to bring the mind out of the realms of attachment to the conscious experience of Nibbana, Amaravati, the deathless realm. It offers a reflection on how we are integrated with the universe. It qualifies the teachings on the laws of karma and birth in vivid terms. Without those laws, our whole sense of purpose and guidance is lost, and we exist in a confused purgatory. The hell realms are the conscious experience of existence without any understanding of morality. Cosmology also emphasizes the significance of the human realm. It's in the human state alone that good karma can be created. Beings in lower realms are generally unaware of the laws of karma and have to remain there until the effects of bad karma have worn out. On the other hand, the realms of the Devata are happy, but dependent on past good karma, which can only be accrued by participating in and aligning the mind with the skillful acts of human beings. It's the Buddhist conception of how the moral universe works, or the universe based upon the laws of cause and effect, and not just cause and effect of physics and chemistry and biology, but cause and effect of actions and choices and intentions. So I'll read that first little bit again, because that I feel is very significant. No intended actions are without effect in the world of the agent. So in the suttas, the Buddha says, karma I call intention. So that when what we call karma, or in Sanskrit, or kamma in Pali, that kind of is an action that is willed. There's an intention behind it. So something that's functional, like say breathing, wouldn't be considered a karmic act because it's just a mechanical function of a living body. But say a choice to pick up a piece of paper and put it down, that would be kamma. That's like an intended action. Or the words I choose to say, that this is all creating kamma, either creating confusion or disappointment or enthusiasm or mixtures of all the above. So, no intended actions are without effect. So, if there's an intended action, there's going to be a result. So, kamma and vipaka. So the action is kamma, and then vipaka is the result. So that's in a way, the Buddhist conception of the universe is the universe of cause and effect. It's a moral universe. There's resonances that are created, just like the laws of chemistry and physics and biology. Then the law of kamma, of cause and effect, is part of the Buddhist understanding of things. With this understanding, Buddhist cosmology works in line with every other form of the teaching as a guide for conscious experience, and to bring the mind out of the realms of attachment to the conscious experience of Nibbana, Amaravati, the deathless realm. So he's saying that even though the Buddhist cosmology is filled with earth spirits and heavenly musicians and Brahma gods and so on and so forth, all these sort of colourful characters of the sort of Buddhist cosmic menagerie, but the laws and the patterns behind all of that are very much significant, because they describe the effects of particular causes and how those laws of cause and effect work in relationship to each other. And so, and it's a point that he's making to say, don't ignore the cosmology, because it does inform one's sense of how cause and effect works, and the guidance of our practice towards realizing Nibbana, arriving at true peacefulness, depends to a great extent on understanding cause and effect. So even though that sounds like a bit, it's not like singing, Jerusalem or having a kind of uplifting, heartfelt religious experience. Cause and effect, it sounds pretty uninspiring, or it's not something that you'd be particularly excited to hear about. But the insight, the understanding of how cause and effect works is tremendously significant in freeing our heart from its habits of attachment, of confusion, of hatred, of fear, of insecurity, of depression, and addictions of various kinds. So even though cause and effect might seem like a dry subject, it's like you might think breathing is a dry subject. Or heartbeat is pretty boring. Like, well, yes, but it's kind of useful. It's a very significant element in the whole human mixture. In a characteristically Buddhist way, the highest opportunities do not come to those who have the most comfort and pleasure, nor to those who have the most suffering, but to those of the middling, painful, and pleasant human realm. The human birth is the most fortunate, having the possibility of immediate realization of Nibbana and of creating good karma. It is, then, part of the practice of this human realm to share the fruits of their good karma with all beings throughout the world system who are able to share in it. Most Buddhist traditions have spiritual exercises that, as in Christian prayer, project the energy of consciousness that has been enriched by meditation, generosity, sense restraint, and so on, towards all beings. In Buddhist practice, this is called the sharing of merit, or punya. Hence, rather than condemning those who are evil or worshipping or feeling jealous of the fortunate, we cultivate sharing the goodness of our practice with all beings, wherever they are on the great wheel of becoming. So regardless of whether beings are hellish and cruel and selfish and destructive, or whether they are sort of blessed and beautiful and helpful and wonderful, we share the blessings of our life regardless. Those of you who are familiar with the chant that we do, those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of Death. So we share the blessings of our life with all of the destructive people who are carrying out wars and the sort of wanton harming of other people, destroying life. We share the blessings of our life with the cruel and the violent, as well as we do with the people who are helping to counteract that. And so in that, it's sometimes very hard to understand that. Well, you rather than, because our culture is very vengeful. Like, well, no, I don't want to share the blessings of it's taken me a lot of work to create all this good karma. I don't want to share it with those guys who are, those sort of evil maniacs who are cutting people's heads off and putting them on YouTube, I'm not going to. Why would I want to support them? I'm not going to give them any blessings. But the understanding is that you're not, by sending forth your good wishes and sharing your good karma, you're not condoning the acts that those kind of people are carrying out, but rather you're seeing that more hatred is only going to make the situation worse. So to love someone does not mean you approve of everything that they do. So sharing the blessings of your life with Adolf Hitler or Chairman Mao or Pol Pot or the maniacs in the Middle East who are cutting people's heads off, it doesn't mean that you think that's good or that's suitable or anything that's remotely worthy, but you're recognizing that more hatred and more negativity will only add more fuel to the fire, and so that you are extending your goodwill and your love for those beings, and then also working vigorously to stop them from doing what they do. So in the West we don't find that. It's difficult to find a place for that, because we feel like if someone's doing something wrong, we should hate them, and that if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. You should hate that person and make them into an enemy. But you can love someone and care for them and do everything that you can to obstruct their actions without any hypocrisy. So that's an unusual but extremely important principle of Dhamma. Rather than dismissing cosmology or seeing it as something very abstract, I would encourage a reflective interpretation with a breadth of vision and scope that is missing in meditation techniques. Even with meditation practice, people's basic viewpoint comes from the belief in themselves as ultimately separate beings. Human beings are born on one of the grosser material planes and are deluded by it. We tend to get locked into a few limited responses in our dealings with the material world. Rather than bringing forth the subtle beauties that the mind is capable of, such as gratitude, wisdom, and empathy with the world of form, much of the response is based upon greed, aversion, and ignorance. Going back to the comments he was making a little bit earlier about the human birth is the most fortunate because it's this mixture of painful and pleasant. And I was saying this the other day. I realized there's quite a few people, I think, from the Buddhist Women's Network weekend. So this was a point I was making, that in terms of the Buddhist understanding of things, is that the human realm is the most fertile realm for insight, because the realm of the animals or the hungry ghosts or the hell realms, there's so much suffering, things are so painful, and the mind is so compulsively drawn towards instinct and reactivity, it's hard to get any space around the experience that is going on. It's hard to have any objectivity. And the Deva realms, life is so pleasant and delightful that there's no need to be objective, because why would you want to have a perspective on unrelenting bliss? It's like you just want to lie back and enjoy it and delight in a day at the beach. So the human realm has that mixture of suffering and bliss, whereby we can experience moments of Deva-like bliss, but then we get hungry and we have to go and eat, or we get a phone call from that brother of ours, or we have bills to pay, and then also we can experience suffering. But it's also, even when we have a painful experience, like a broken leg or someone close to us has died, we still also have the capacity to be objective. We can look at that from a bit of a distance, say, oh, I really feel sad about my mother's death. We know that we feel sad. We're not lost in that sadness. Something in us knows, I'm feeling really sad. So the human, and I was describing the other day how it's like the human realm is like the warm tide pools. It's the literal zone between the sea and the shore. That the human realm is where the two extremes meet, and that's in the warm tide pools where the sea and the land meet each other. That is the most fertile region, and where our ancient ancestors probably developed. And so exactly in the same way, cosmologically, the human realm is like the warm tide pools of possibility, and so that we have that mixture of the pleasant and the painful, like the sea and the shore, that we can learn from. So human beings are born on one of the grosser material planes and are deluded by it. We tend to get locked into a few limited responses in our dealings with the material world. And rather than bringing forth the subtle beauties that the mind is capable of, such as gratitude, wisdom, and empathy with the world of form, much of the response is based on greed, aversion, and ignorance. So we relate to the material world of how much I've got, looking after my things, am I healthy, am I unhealthy, what are other people doing? Oh, this one's exciting, that one's irritating, that one's frightening, and lost in those sort of day-to-day judgments and concerns, and less of an impulse of the mind moving towards sort of gratitude, kindness, and selflessness. As the other day, I was also giving the example of what fills the newspaper. It depends which newspaper you read, but usually the things that make the headlines in the newspapers are excitements, scandals, crises. That's what gets our attention, rather than headline in the Hemel Hempstead Gazette: Ajahn Amaro feels grateful for the opportunity to be on retreat. Banner headline: hooray, 3 months of breathing in and breathing out and walking up and down. Monk feels happy because of the opportunity to do not very much. I think the sales would probably dip a little bit. Ajahn Amaro runs off with 3 16-year-olds to start a new religion in the Cairngorms. Monk rebels against monastery and decries the Buddha as being a complete fool, declares himself to be the next Messiah. I think that would probably make the Hemel Gazette.
Even the Guardian.
Even the Guardian, yeah. Although the human mind can experience a profound range of consciousness, from insensitive stupor to ecstatic bliss, simulacra of what is mapped out in the cosmology. It's like simulacra means things that are similar to, or things that mimic or copy. So that just saying that we can have a Brahma-like experience, or we can have a hellish experience. We also base our attitudes on the assumption, coupled with the denial, that we are incarcerated in a skin bag for a lifetime and then get annihilated. It's a wonderful turn of phrase, Ajahn Sucitto. We should have a few of these pinned up on the trees around here. We base our attitudes on the assumption, coupled with the denial, that we are incarcerated in a skin bag for a lifetime and then annihilated. Also, I was quoting that passage from W.B. Yeats the other day. Consume my heart away, sick with desire and fastened to a dying animal, it knows not what it is, and gather me into the artifice of eternity. So, sick with desire and fastened to a dying animal. So, with that view, the mind is bound to generate get it while you can impulses. So, if that's what you think life is, imprisoned in a skin bag and then get wiped out at the end, well, make hay while the sun shines, get it while you can. True enough, that view has a certain reality to it too. It holds up under the dim light of semi-conscious experience. But acting on that assumption certainly heightens the possibility for birth in one of those lower realms of delusion. So if that's your attitude, that we only have this one life, and so you might as well just get as much sense pleasure out of it as you can because we're just going to be annihilated at the end, then, as he says, acting on that assumption certainly heightens the possibility for birth in one of the lower realms of delusion, because you're likely to make unskillful karma along the way if that's your attitude. As we have seen, there are many worlds in Buddhist cosmology. Among these are the realms of celestial beings called Devata or Devas. Such beings make a fairly common appearance in the scriptures of all the Buddhist schools. In fact, the Buddha is known as the teacher of celestial as well as human beings. Satta Deva Manusanang. It's one of the qualities of the Buddha, the teacher of of humans and celestial beings. They are born in the celestial realms in accordance with the laws of Dhamma, through having lived human lives full of such virtues as kindness, honesty, harmlessness, and generosity. According to scriptural accounts, Devata are less constrained by material form, having more diaphanous bodies. That means filmy or insubstantial, and less kind of solid bodies. They have more diaphanous bodies and a consciousness which is intelligent and refined. The subtlety and the skill of the Buddha's teachings appeal to them, and they have a high regard for morality. The Buddha apparently taught the Abhidhamma, the metaphysical construction of the Dhamma, for their benefit, and many gained understanding through that. However, the Devata find the direct understanding of Dhamma through contemplating impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self even more difficult than humans do. Life on that ethereal plane seems very long, so it's difficult for the Devas to notice impermanence. The almost constant, refined happiness. Some Devas feel a little under par for a week before they pass away, because saying their armpits start to smell, and the flowers start to go sort of wilted at the edges, and then off they pop. So that does motivate them to have does not motivate them to have a great urge to practice. Consequently, they are unable to provide a transcendent teaching for others. However, they are sensitive to purity and gentleness. Whenever these qualities manifest, they experience great joy. They all celebrate the proclamation of the Dhamma, but few gain the Dhamma eye. It's from the suggestion in the sutta that they are rejoicing, but not sharing Kondanya's insight, that this series of paintings evolved. So there's only a couple more paragraphs, so I'll just finish off reading that first. What relevance has the plight of the Devata to the struggling human aspirant? Quite a lot, when we recognize that the universe, including the heaven realms, is as much a part of us as we are of it. In Buddhist cosmology, heavens and hells are equivalent to states of mind that we can experience within this lifespan. As these result from the degrees of refinement of the mind's attachments, the heavenly realms embody the positions that consciousness can adopt in the search for truth. They provide a perfect model of how the mind can grasp pleasant and inspiring states and be unable to reflect upon them as changing and insubstantial. It's useful to know about the biases of the high-minded, peace-loving celestial realms when it comes to working with our own well-intentioned inclinations. We have to remember that it's only through non-attachment insight that we can realize the liberation that is for the ultimate welfare of all beings. The first group of Devata, the Bhuma or Earth Devas, pronounced as Bhuma, not Bumma, do not have a Bhumma. That's what he's trying to indicate. And also, he was writing this book. The origin of this book was that he was trying to get it printed so it could be given away free when we opened up the branch monastery in California. But the book was delayed by about 3 years, and the monastery was delayed by about 5 or 6 years. So they didn't coincide, but it was for a sort of Bay Area, San Francisco audience that he was generally writing. So the first group of Devata, the Bhuma or Earth Devas, pronounced Bhuma, not Bumma, do not have a realm of their own. They abide on the earth, probably under the supervision of the 4 great kings who appear in the next painting. Folklore of most countries mention encounters with these beings. We can see them as representative of the states of mind that find happiness in the beauty of the earth. When one walks around in beautiful countryside on a sunny day and the birds are singing, the grass is green, the sky is blue, one feels an inner happiness. But if one is looking for powerful excitement, or if one has just had a fight, then it's difficult to appreciate the beauty of nature. It depends on the kamma vipaka in the mind of the individual. An appreciation of nature requires a somewhat refined state of consciousness which is natural in a calm or gentle mind. This is where the Earth Devas live. The Devas really appreciate the presence of the Buddha, but with their unreflective minds, they portray him based upon their limited Deva experience. So, he appears as one of them, a very sunny, radiant being, and the wheel of the law, in the painting, becomes just a decorative frame for him. And this is a motif that Ajahn Sucitto uses throughout this whole section of the Devatas. So here, the Dhamma wheel, the spokes sort of fade out about half the way in, and the wheel has got the vines sort of weaving around it, and so the Dhamma wheel has become a sort of decorative. Oh, that's a very nice little archway for the garden. And so that as the paintings proceed, as the Deva realms get more and more refined, the wheel gets more and more sketchy and diaphanous until the wheel sort of disappears altogether in sort of the blazing light of the Brahma realms. The Devas really appreciate the presence of the Buddha, but their unreflective minds. But with their unreflective minds, they portray him based upon their limited Deva experience. So he appears as one of them, sort of like this kind of Hawaiian orchid garden image. Sunny, radiant being, and the wheel of the law becomes just a decorative frame for him. We see them here paying little attention to the Dhamma, the teachings on impermanence, cessation of becoming, and the realization of Nibbana. They're enjoying themselves. One of them is riding on a fish, one's sitting on a flower, one of them's riding on a bird. Everything is fine in the world. We'll think about Nibbana some other time. This existence is good enough. This is the Devaloka of refined physical pleasure. The next one is somewhat different. So that's the end of that particular chapter, and that basic theme of also the Deva realms representing our different mind states is very significant, and also if just raising the subject, the mind goes to, wow, all this kind of Deva stuff, I've never met one. I never met a pixie or never had any of these sort of great high beings coming down from the Tavatimsa heaven to come and give me teachings or come and say hello. So I don't believe it. But when we do a blessing, do the Paritta chanting, those of you who've done retreats with me or been at these kind of events, well, the thing that I always say is that when at the beginning of the Parittas, we like this morning, Ajahn Amaro chanted that it's an invitation for all the Devas and Brahma gods, beings to come from all of the different realms. So you invite the Nagas, the dragons, the earth spirits, the heavenly musicians, the Devas of all the different directions. But you're inviting anybody who's interested in being a helpful presence. Please come and show up and bless this assembly, or bless this this group. If you're interested and you want to help out, please, you're invited to come and bring your goodwill and whatever help you can provide. So it's like an invitation. It's like sending out the invites to the party for everyone other beings to come along. So what I always say is, if you're allergic to the idea of Brahma gods and pixies and dragons and celestial musicians, then that's quite all right, because you can think of it in terms of those bright. Deva literally means one who's bright or radiant. That causes vision. So you can see it as inviting the bright forces within you to come to the surface, as well as inviting the bright forces outside to come in. And I always say, whether it's inside coming out or outside coming in, same. And that's also a strong principle that you have within the Buddhist world, that you're seeing that there is the power of the universe is not just out there, but also the power of the universe is in here. It's the same universe. It's the same power. And so if you are like Ajahn Buddhadasa, you don't like to talk about devas and spirits and dragons and whatnot, that's fine. But you can also see that you have the capacity to be kind. You have the capacity to be noble. You have the capacity to be respectful and wise. And so those bright qualities within you can be invited to manifest and to bless the group that is say there having the chanting. So if anyone has any questions or things that like clarification or comments, please don't be shy. As I was reading, I don't think Ajahn Sucitto covers it. He might do later on. But there's a very, very interesting realm, a unique Brahma realm. It's called the Asanya Satta Brahma realm. And so the Brahma realms are very, very refined, and they're usually based, or they're seen as being symbolic of the different levels of meditative absorption. So the bottom three Brahma realms represent first jhana, and then the next three Brahma realms represent second jhana, then the next three Brahma realms represent third jhana, then the next three represent fourth jhana. So you've got the lowest 12 Brahma realms all represent those jhanas of form. And then, if I remember correctly, then there's the next Brahma realm is the one that's called the Asanyasatta Brahma realm. I'm not absolutely certain; I'd have to look it up. But and then above that, you have the formless Brahma realms that relate to the formless jhanas. Anyway, the Asanyasatta Brahma realm is a result of developing deep concentration, which is obviously very wholesome. So you have to have a mind in a very, very clear and bright, wholesome state. But it's a development of jhana that's based on a rejection of the sense world. So along with the extremely skillful and wholesome qualities of brightness of mind and deep concentration, so very, very bright and very, very wholesome, there's this little undercurrent of, I don't want to bother with the world. I don't want to see or hear or feel anything. I'm just going to put that all aside. I don't want to bother with that. I'm just going to focus on my meditation object and absorb totally. So the Asanyasatta Brahma realm has a unique quality whereby if you're born in that realm, you have a sort of fantastic Brahma body. It's like the highest of the realms of form, but because of that aversion to the sense world, you are completely unconscious for the whole of that lifespan. So the descriptions of it are like you have this fantastically sort of luminous, radiant Brahma body that's millions of miles long, and living in this fantastic Brahma sort of palatial realm up in the upper reaches of the cosmos. And the lifespan is 20,000 eons long, but you're completely unconscious for the whole time. So that even though you've created a lot of skillful karma to be born as a Brahma god, you don't enjoy any of it because you're unconscious the whole time. And then when that lifespan comes to an end, then you die while you're still unconscious. And so the next birth can be anywhere. So it's again, I think it's a symbolic thing, but it's like if you're developing meditation, be aware of that negativity towards the sense world. That I don't want to bother with that. I don't want to let that in. That doesn't matter. Even with a lot of wholesome qualities, if you have that, if that thread of aversion or rejection or suppression is sustained, then that has its at least in terms of Buddhist cosmology, that has its repercussions. And I don't want anyone to lose any sleep tonight. Like, if I'm going to be a Brahma god, I want to be awake. I want to enjoy it for like 20,000 eons. I don't sleep through the whole thing. But again, it's cosmology. It's a myth, but it also points to watch out. That if your meditation is based on that thread of I don't want to bother with that grubby world and having to sort of think and feel, keep those feelings away. I just want to focus. Then it's going to have an effect. So I'll leave that with you to ponder for the evening.